Welcome back to another video. It's your boy Ray Toops. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, or become a member of the channel, help support the content. With that being said, today we have a topic suggested by Vesper. He said, should we expect one more tanking season? Does it depend on where the Jazz land in the lottery, like when they pick 1 through 3 versus 4 through 6? And at first, I was going to move this down my log list for videos to make, but it actually makes things pretty interesting to think about. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this one. So obviously, the best case scenario is a top 3 pick or top 1 for the Utah Jazz. They also have the Timberwolves pick, which is looking like it's going to go in the middle, maybe late lottery to 17, 18 even probably, and somewhere in that ballpark. Then you're going to have the obvious best team in the NBA currently by record standards being the Cleveland Cavaliers pick at the very end of the first round of the draft. Still 3 first-round draft picks. Now, could you package all 3 together to move up if things don't go favorably? I would say probably so. I would be hard-pressed to do so unless we end up with the 4th pick. I think when you go to 5 or 6, that's where things get a little bit more shaky. But at the 4, I feel really comfortable because we're talking about a world where we have VJ Edgecombe or Kasparas Yakachonis. And honestly, they're 2 flavors of a really solid guard, but they do 2 separate things really, really well. Now, obviously, they're both decent passers, but to go over some quick numbers as of me making this video, you have VJ Edgecombe over there at Baylor putting up 14.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 2 steals per game, and then shooting 43.5% from the field and 35.5% from three-point range on a modest number of attempts to go along with 77% shooting from the free throw line. He's also 6'5 and 180 roughly at the point of his last measurement, and he's 19 years old. For Yakachonis, he's 6'6", 205 and 19, but he gives you 15.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 4.5, almost 5 assists per game, shooting 46% from the field and 33% from three-point range. However, he does have a very large showing of his three-point shooting prowess, and his overall difficulty of three-point shooting attempts is by a considerable margin more difficult than VJ's happens to be. He also shoots a more respectable 84% almost from the free throw line. Now, the reason why I say that being in a 4 through 6 spot kind of really determines on if we get 4 or not. If I see us go 5 or beyond, then yes, unfortunately, I think that there is another year of tanking because obviously we have the wonder kid now that's going to be going to Utah. And then you're also going to end up having the Boozer twins among some other interesting prospects coming out next year. But I do feel as though if you do get top 3 and you have the opportunity to get one of the legendary players that is expected to be there, especially if you get top 1 and you do manage to get Cooper Flagg, which everybody's been raving about, then you feel really, really confident in your ability to just say, we don't need to be bad on purpose. We can just play really, really good. And if we end up being a little bit lackluster, well, then we'll shuffle some things around and maybe we'll move up in the draft via trades with our multitude of draft picks that we do have. But otherwise, let's just sit where we are and play this thing out. Now, if you end up at 4, VJ Edgecombe to me, and Vesper, I believe you also put in a suggested topic, I'll probably flash it on screen, asking me about how I feel if we do end up at that 4 spot between these 2 players, ironically enough. I think that, honestly, it comes down to what flavor we're looking for. If the Utah Jazz want to keep Lauri Markkanen as a big piece, obviously they maxed him out this past offseason and he wasn't able to be traded at the deadline, but there's going to be some inevitable talks about when the offseason comes, if or not he actually ends up being traded. Now, I believe that since we already decided to pay him and his new contract is a little bit more difficult to move, it just makes sense to go ahead and keep going with the engine and the one guy that genuinely wants to be with you on this team. In that world, I think Yakachonis might be the better pairing alongside Lauri Markkanen specifically. He has all the point guard tropes that you want to see. The wraparound passes, the behind the backs. He's a little bit more of a crafty finesse player. He doesn't rely superbly on athleticism, so finishing at the rim, he's going to have to take a step forward when he gets to the NBA level because obviously, yes, at the Division I level, there's going to be a lot of really, really good shot blockers. There's going to be a lot of athletic guys, but in the league, it's the best of the best. So he's going to have to add to his floater bag and be a little bit more intentional when he's going downhill. At the same time, his footwork is really, really good. Arguably top 2 in the class. Now, if we're talking about guys that are 19, 18, I think that he is the guy with the best footwork in the class above even the guys listed ahead of him. Now, in that same mold, the reason why his shooting percentage from three-point range is a little bit low is because he does take a lot of side steps, a lot of step backs, a little bit more of the craftier and more artistically expressed three-point attempts. Obviously, at the college level, there's going to be a lot of guys that end up taking some interesting shots, but he is agreeably one of one in that department, and that's why his percentage is low 30s. But I think that he's definitely, if he takes a reliable and consistent shot selection sample size, more so a 36 point. I think he's in the same realm as VJ Edgecombe. At the same time, his free throw percentage being 84% shows us that he can shoot. Now, obviously, VJ's is significantly lower, but being in the 70s isn't necessarily a bad thing. That said, I believe that being in the 80s on a consistent basis is a lot more reliable to believe in, even when your three-point percentage is a little bit faulty, just because we can watch you on tape and see the type of threes you're taking. So if you're taking an ill-advised shot and it just doesn't go in, well, that's just an ill-advised shot selection. Now, the ones that we want you to actually take, when we see you in our stadium and we see you on our hardwood, when you take the shot that you're supposed to take, will you hit that shot? And that's the biggest question, because if you can't hit that shot, well, then there's no reason to really look beyond the numbers, because the tape is telling us everything we need to know. But for him, I like the craftiness that he passes with. I like the way that he sees the floor. He has a very wide range of vision, and his overall understanding and IQ is required to be at a certain level for him to be really, really good as a lead guard, as opposed to some other guys that can rely a little bit more on athleticism. VJ Edgecombe has a lot more athleticism than Yakachonis does. So it makes sense why VJ would obviously be a more reliable piece if you're saying, well, we're still not necessarily completely bought in on Lowry, so I don't know if we actually want to end up trading him or keeping him. Well, in that case, VJ is probably your better bet, because individually as a prospect, sheer talent-wise, he has the upper end because of his athleticism and because of his finishing ability at the rim. You don't have to necessarily worry as much, even though he is a little bit of a lighter framed player. You can have him add on a few extra pounds, and if he's right there around 200, 205, then you feel really, really confident. At the same time, you do also still have Isaiah Collier. Now, if Isaiah Collier cuts down on his turnovers, then really there's no real idea where you want to go from there, because okay, Keontae George has already been moved to the bench. Does that mean Isaiah Collier is playing for the starting point guard spot with whoever you draft? Or does that mean that person's going to be your sixth man and Keontae George is your seventh man? There's a lot of things that get confusing there. And it's like, okay, at that point, do you think that you need to trade Colin Sexton? Do you need to trade Jordan Clarkson? Or do you keep them on the roster and you just play things out? And I think that's where it gets a little bit fluid and a little bit more difficult to predict. But I think as a scorer and being put in more of an off-guard position, you would probably rather have VJ Edgecombe. So if Isaiah Collier ends up continuing this trend and he, being the rookie of the month for February, continues that streak and he shows the league, hey, I really passed this rock, I need to cut down on my turnovers. By the way, Yakachonis has turnover problems as well. Then you might want to stick with Isaiah Collier, because obviously Yakachonis isn't necessarily the greatest defender. He does seem to be a little bit lead of foot at times, and his closeouts can be a little bit lackluster at certain situations. He plays the passing lanes pretty well, and like I said, his IQ allows him to cheat a little bit defensively for his lack of athleticism. VJ Edgecombe has higher upside. He is also longer than Isaiah Collier, so he has the opportunity to showcase some more interesting things. So like I said, it really just comes down to the flavoring and who you really want to lean on more so. If you're looking for athleticism and you're not necessarily looking for the fit alongside Lowry, then VJ Edgecombe is going to be the more reliable piece at that spot. But if you're talking about the long-term potential player that will end up being really, really good alongside Lauri Markkanen, then Yakachonis is obviously the more preferred option. And honestly, when it comes to the other guys on the team and the shooters that we have and the lob tests that we have, if you keep John Collins, those type of guys are going to feed a little bit more off of having Yakachonis. But like I said, it also creates a little bit of convoluted energy around the improvements that Isaiah Collier has had, which could by default lead you back towards VJ Edgecombe at the 4. Now, if that ends up happening, I think that there may be another tank on the horizon, unfortunately, which is something that I don't necessarily love. But if we go the first 10 games, I think there might be a little bit of feeler games in there. You see VJ Edgecombe on the court. If he looks like he could be a borderline all-star caliber player in his rookie year or by his sophomore year, then I think there's a world where you say, let's just run the tables, see what we can do. But if you do draft him and you think that he's not necessarily up to standard, it's going to take him like 3, 4, maybe even 5 years to be an all-star caliber player, then you're going to have to tank again. And that's something that I don't necessarily want. So I would say if we end up with a 4 through 6 pick, the likelihood of us tanking again becomes like 80%, unless we draft VJ Edgecombe and VJ Edgecombe ends up being the preferred option. You see in 2 years, he's going to be an all-star caliber player. For Yakachonis, it's going to be a world where you decide, yeah, we like Isaiah Collier, but Yakachonis just has something. He has the it factor. Yes, he's not necessarily the longest, he's not the strongest, but he's pretty sturdy. He has an NBA-ready build, and we don't really have to worry about too much when it comes to what he's going to give us on a night-by-night basis. Then that certainty in that point guard spot could end up leading you down that route. And obviously, like I said, if you guarantee that you're going to continue building around Lauri Markkanen. If we end up with a top 3 pick, there's no way that I would rather see us tank another year, whether it's the Boozer Twins, whether we have our young man growing up at Utah taking that step forward. I don't really want to see us tank again. Has there been some good ball throughout this season despite us tanking? Yes, for sure. There's been millions of bright spots, and I've liked seeing each and every one of them. But still, watching your team lose 80% of the time going down the stretch of the season is never fun for any fan across the globe, especially when ticket prices just continue to stay up. It's kind of like, okay, we're paying a premium to see losing basketball, put mildly. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Vesper, I hope this answers your question. I'll probably be getting to more of your quotes because I did see you slide up on that post really consistently, and I liked a lot of the topics that you had for me. With that being said, go and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, become a member to help support the content. And as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're in the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.